Gary, how have you been going? I mean, football is your life, and it's sort of been taken away from you like it has everyone else. How have you been coping without footy for the past few months?
Yeah, coping pretty well. It's been probably 42 years, I guess, that you think about as a player, as a coach, and certainly then doing a little bit of media in the sort of middle 2000s. So it was very, very, very different for me. But now that we're sort of seeing potentially a little bit more on what our future may be, you're still sort of getting back into that positivity about potentially getting some sort of season. Not that we're getting any real information just at the minute, but yeah, I think like a lot of people, we've had to obviously do the right thing, and as long as we've abided by the rules, and now that the AFL got ticked off, and of course they'll be back next week, hopefully there's a bit of that sort of flow-on effect down to that. But yeah, otherwise fine.
I understand it must be frustrating because obviously the AFL was and at AFL House, getting just the AFL competition was obviously the priority, and everything else sort of feeds down from that. Has it been frustrating perhaps not having much information come your way as written from the VFL?
Yeah, and that's a normal reaction when you don't know that much. So you get a lot of people, as you know, because of course footy is very much an enormously big thing within the state of Victoria and obviously outside. So people want to know. We believe that the second tier competition is extremely important within the AFL structure. We understand that so much energy has to go into getting the AFL up and going, and certainly the positivity that the likes of Gil McLachlan and all the people that have worked behind the scenes have, you would say on the surface, been quite amazing and outstanding. And obviously all the clubs wanted to get back and play. And we understand that there is no normalcy, and hence the reason why we've just got to make sure that we sit tight for why the big decisions and when the big decisions are made, and then once they've made, then hopefully, and again, we know in our own minds that big decisions involve the VFL, so we're just at the minute waiting for some sort of understanding of what the next step would be.
And, do you think there'll be a season as of now? I mean, how confident are you that you're going to play some footy this year?
Yeah, I've always been a glass half full, so I'm still anticipating that there will be. I haven't had that directive or anything like that, obviously, but I've always said that the VFL competition has been, in the time that I've been associated with it, a very vibrant competition. There's all different alignments, whether you're full, partial or standalones. And obviously we feel that we've been able to match the heavyweights in what we've been able to do. 2 premierships in 10 years, consistent, sustained success, and that's important when you're in an organisation. And if you think back to where we currently sit as a standalone team, we've been able to hold our own, as have Williamstown, Werribee look like they're on the charge as well, and you've still got Frankston and Coburg who have done enormously well just to stay in the competition even though they haven't had success. So we provide, as you would know, Andrew, a ground or a home for lots of players who potentially can go on and get drafted. They miss out with AFL alignments because of the numbers, and of course some just want to get a game. They wouldn't necessarily do that. So yeah, I'm hoping if it is a reduced season that we can play some sort of competition footy, and I think that's good for everyone's being. You know, the mental wellness that we're going through, the community footy, and I've always said we play a very, very important role within the AFL scheme of things.
How important is in a role like the VFL? Is it understated perhaps? I mean, how important is a second tier competition to the AFL as a whole?
Oh, it's extremely important. You know, I think situations have changed in the length of time I've been involved. There was maybe AFL teams that were coming back and who were purely and simply development, but then that sort of changed around when I think the types of Footscray came into the competition. They've won 2 flags. We've won 2 flags in the last 10 years. Williamstown's won 1. They obviously went within a whisker of winning one last year. And again, there seems to be, I think, a lot of the teams that they want to have their VFL teams become successful because it gives their AFL teams a wonderful grounding and opportunity to have their best list available when they make finals. Collingwood, Essendon, obviously Richmond, Box Hill Hawks, Hawthorn, they would love their VFL teams to be playing finals every year. So for us to keep being able to keep pace with those teams in this competition, I think the AFL do need us, and that's a biased approach from my point of view, but I certainly believe that because of the fact that we want to get young men to fulfil their dreams and reach the highest level. That might be VFL, but it also might be getting drafted to the AFL. So if we can continue to do that, we play a very, very relevant role within the VFL second tier competition.
Are you worried about the VFL, given sort of the current climate?
I'm not personally. I think there's a lot of negativity out there. Do you want to listen to that noise, or do you want to transfer over to the positivity? And I'd rather transfer over to the positivity. I'm just saying that don't forget about us, but we know that AFL is an almighty big setup in AFL footy, and we take our hats off to them, but also too, there's also a lot of strength within small numbers at times, and if there is a bit of adversity out there, quite often the greatest growth comes from adversity.
The AFL hands you the keys to the VFL setup. I mean, what do? Do you say we just want standalone teams only, that should be the VFL, or should it be a combination of, is now a time where we look at splitting up and bringing back, sort of a reserves competition, or should the VFL be the second tier?
I think if it was my own personal opinion, I'd rather see the VFL be the second tier competition. Now, we believe that playing against better men, better players, more talent, then that makes us a better team as well, because we are playing against the best.
The Port Melbourne, the footy club, I mean, it's an institution really,
yeah.
In not only the VFL circles but the community. How is it going and how is it coped with no footy?
Yeah, I think if you look at from what we've been able to try and generate over a long period of time, it's about rolling your sleeves up. Talk about adversity. 3 years ago, we did have to put ourselves in a position of where we needed to appeal to our wonderful sponsors and members and supporters and try and grow because of our financial situation. We had players who came to me and said, we will do what we can for the footy club. We played one game for nothing, which was the first round of the year. We went on and won an amazing flag against Richmond. So what we're trying to do now is we've just signed a lucrative sponsorship with the CFMEU, ETU. We've still got our major sponsor who has just taken on a slightly different role from last year, still on board. We've got some wonderful people working behind the scenes in trying to develop a greater sponsorship network. And this fighting fund, future fund's probably more the words, that we're looking to try and again grow our demographic of what we can have coming into the football club. And I said to someone the other day, I know there's been a lot of talk about flattening the curve, but we want to get ahead of the curve because of the way the Port Melbourne Football Club is. We're the most competitive organisation that I've been part of for a long, long time. We're obviously one of the most successful organisations. We currently lead the competition with 17 premierships, and we've been able to stay, I guess, pace with what's going on. Now, it's not easy, as we all know, but life's never easy. But I'd also say that we're about trying to move forward because you can't change what's gone on in the past.
And in terms of your players, I mean, you face so many challenges as a coach trying to motivate players, but how have you gone about motivating players? Especially, I mean, AFL players, whilst they're not playing, they're still getting paid.
Yeah.
In terms of guys who rely on this extra cash to supplement their other income, I mean, how difficult has that been for your players?
That has been difficult because of the uncertainty, and what we've tried to do though is give them any information that we can. And we've basically tried to say, yes, it is tough at the minute, but be patient. And we're more about trying to get ready for giving the nod to play rather than just saying, oh, it's all too hard. And I've never ever seen in my time here any player or any person involved with the Port Melbourne Footy Club that has said it's all too hard. And if we did that, we know where we would be. And we've been now alive for 145 years as a footy club, and I know we're all going to pass through it at some particular stage, but it's the relevancy that I've been always struck by and admired because of our players that we've played here within the football club. And there's been some absolute amazing players that have stuck at this footy club. They could have gone and got a lot more money elsewhere, but I think it's the culture, it's the ownership, it's the responsibility, and it's just the fact that we believe we are an identity that needs to be heard. And the players have always adopted that mantra, I guess.
Would your message be for the players, is it potentially you're going to have to play for no coin this year?
That's a possibility. And again, we would totally understand, because everyone's got a right to say whether they would or they wouldn't, and we get that. And you've got to be respectful of everyone's decision. But we'll do what we've always done here, is have a collaborative approach about what we believe is best for the Port Melbourne Footy Club. And if players said, no, I wouldn't play, again, I'd accept that. You never want to force anyone to do something that they're not comfortable with. And I don't think I've ever asked players to do anything that I wouldn't do. So we've always seen that when the players have made a decision, it's always in the best interest of the football club, but it's also to themselves, because Port Melbourne's always looked at our players being the most valuable asset that we can have, and we've treated them that way, at least in my time anyway.
You've obviously taken a bit of a haircut, for want of a better term, in terms of the salary. Yeah. I mean, are you full-time here? Like, do you have your own business interests elsewhere, or is this your full-time?
Yeah, this is primarily my full-time gig, and obviously there's a bit of speaking stuff too that's thrown in, and I guess talking to you today, maybe there's a bit of an opportunity to be a VFL mouthpiece. But again, I'm so passionate about the second tier competition. So we took a haircut, if you like, back in 2017. It wasn't the worst thing that's ever happened. And of course, we know there are so many people out there who are hurting, and that's probably part of why I strongly believe we need to have a competition this year, because of the role we play within the community, within grassroots footy, the amount of young men that want to be able to get out and kick the footy for a couple of hours. We understand that there's protocols, health and safety are number one, and we would never do anything to go against that. But also too, just for your own mental wellness of being able to get out, be with a group of people who you love, and I love all my boys, and I love the Port Melbourne Footy Club. So if we can play a very small part in getting the community up and going, why wouldn't we be at the forefront of doing that?
If you got the green light sort of tomorrow, how quickly do you think you could actually turn a season around?
Be pretty easy, I think, because the boys have been semi-professional now for 10 weeks, and they've had fitness programs and conditioning programs. So if you said to me, is there a time frame? Maybe around that sort of 4 to 5 weeks, I think, would be what we would need.
And you're happy to have a season to go from, say, mid-July to October or something like that? Do you think that's sufficient? Do you think you can get us a flag in that time? A flag, yeah, definitely. In that time, I should say.
Well, I think people who know me, I'm pretty competitive, so a flag would be ideal. And we could call it the COVID Cup, who knows? But yeah, the players have done a lot of work already to a certain point, and for us to come in and play a season, I'm only one person and one voice, but I think the majority of the Port Melbourne Football Club would love to have a season of some degree. Yeah. But it would have to fit into the protocols of what we discussed before, the financial impost, and also to obviously health and welfare of everyone that's associated with the footy club. So, and hopefully the state government and AFL and AFL Victoria, and I know Paul Malcolm, our CEO, has done an enormous amount of hard work, and as the board, to try and get us to a point where we could potentially play.
And just the last couple, obviously the Waffle and the SANFL have got essentially a green light.
Yep.
How difficult is it to sort of sit back and see them potentially starting to play footy, and have any of you guys who, I mean, because getting drafted is obviously a dream for everyone still, so have they thought maybe if I go over there and have any of you guys thought of going into state just to get a game?
Not to my knowledge, Andrew. And obviously too, if the Waffle and the SANFL are doing it, it's probably a little bit like the NRL and the AFL. The AFL didn't jump at any shadows when obviously the NRL were going to do what they had to do. So sometimes sitting back and seeing how it plays out is not such a bad thing. And maybe you can always learn about things that are seen to be, from a timing point of view, somewhat a little bit more time is better than less time. And providing you join those dots, you end up generally coming up with the right thing. So, no, I'm not concerned at this stage that the Waffle and SANFL have got the green light. We're more about what's going to go on in Victoria, not necessarily South Australia and Western Australia.
In terms of the Eastern Seaboard, I mean, there's talk of getting, a couple of needful sides and joining the VFL. Is that something you think should happen, or should you be welcoming teams like that into the competition, do you think?
It probably goes back to what's going to happen at the AFL. We're hearing a lot of talk about reduced list sizes. We're talking about where are all the coaches going, the soft cap. So if it means another couple of teams were to come in the competition, then I wouldn't be against that, providing that the Port Melbourne Football Club is in that competition. And we have a service to, if there is less list sizes, where are those players going to go? Hopefully back to the VFL. Coaching. You'd only think that the coaching would improve if we're getting AFL coaches who are looking for positions to come back and then coach within the VFL. You'd only have that happen though if you had more teams to a degree. So there are some positives in regards to that. So again, a lot of things would dovetail once one decision is made, and I think that's extremely important. But I've always worked on the philosophy of arming yourself with as much information as you can. Don't jump at shadows and then make a valued decision once you've got all that information.
It looks like list cuts is probably going to be the way to go. So, I mean, that will, you'd think, trickle down effect and will strengthen the VFL, do you think?
It depends on, we were alerted to the fact that last year there probably would be a reduced list at VFL level going down over the next 3 years. Now, one of the considerations probably is that depending on the list sizes, then AFL clubs would have to look at what sort of demographic of player would you want? Is it young? Is it, ready-made? So we're all on about looking at what we can do to field the best Port Melbourne team. So if it was that there were more players coming back to the VFL, we'd certainly want to be doing what we can to house those players and potentially give them the next opportunity to go. So yeah, it would be a flow-on effect, but again, we were aware already that there were possibly going to be changes anyway. So again, get ahead of the curve, not be behind.
You've coached for 4 decades. Also, you've been involved in footy in 4 decades. Coached for half of that. How much longer have you got to go? The fire still burns as bright as ever.
I think with our conversation you can probably see that it is, but you might have to talk to Paul Malcolm and the Port Melbourne board, but yeah, I'd be keen to go around for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, how much longer is a little bit longer, do you think? Are you going to be coaching like your John Kennedys and your Gabby Jeans, into your sort of...
Well, I might have to get an old overcoat and get my ears bigger, who knows. So, but I have such a strong belief in the people that I work with, and if I can nurture and assist coaches, and one of the most pleasing things that occurred to me in the last 12 months was that a couple of the coaches that I actually coached as players, and I've coached a few of them probably most of their adult life, have now put so much worth back into the Port Melbourne Footy Club. If they were happy to come in and perhaps learn, and we thought there was the right time, then more than happy, but I still think I've got a little bit to offer.
And just lastly, any message to anyone wanting to get on board and help the Port Melbourne Footy Club give a little kick in their coffers? What would your message be to them and how do they get involved?
Most definitely, we would welcome anybody that was prepared to see how an organisation that is small in relation to potentially publicity, but it's a little bit like when you go and look at a pyramid, you quite often look at the tip, but you don't realise how much work has gone on at the base. And we're doing an enormously huge amount of work at the base. And we believe we're pretty good at getting to the top, or the tip. So again, it's a wonderful grassroots footy. We've been going for 145 years. We want to stay in this competition a lot longer. We want to be relevant, and we think we can play an extremely big part in where the second tier competition may go.